Hi everybody, I'm Robin Roy and I'm a dog trainer who often works with the West LA Obedience Training Club. And I just thought I'd give you a little introduction to training and starting classes and what we usually do as an introduction in our group classes. The trend nowadays is for more positive training. Years ago, we would take the leash, yank on it, and say to the dog, sit. And the dog would go, what? Because we were punishing them rather than actually showing them what we wanted. And positive training doesn't mean that we're giving them everything in life for free and no effort and they can do whatever they want. We still have structure, we still have leadership. But it does mean trying to show them and educate them and show them what you want with food or real life rewards or toys before we start telling them that they're wrong. We're trying to emphasize the good and try to ignore the bad whenever possible. I know sometimes that's hard, but it's only fair. If you were learning a new language and I punished you for not knowing what chaise means, then that's not fair. If you say to the dog, blah, 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 and he looks at you like he's clueless, then you haven't done your job and shown him what you want. So sometimes a food reward will help with that. Most dogs learn pretty quickly when they're hungry. Most dogs learn pretty quickly when you're using a high value food. We do a lot of luring at first, which is a pretty easy way to train. There are other ways to train that may even be more successful with other behaviors, but luring works really well for an average trainer just to get started. You can lure him into a sit, your dog. You can lure him into a down. You show him the food and he follows it whichever way you go. It works really successfully. So you can find a treat that works really well for your dog. That may be something moist and soft and quickly eaten so they know exactly why they got it. Once in a blue moon, a crunchy treat can work as well, but sometimes by the time they're done crunching, they don't know why they got it. Right? So if you're teaching sit and they're crunching a biscuit and they got out of the sit, by the time they're done, they may think they got the cookie for getting up. So you want to be really exact with what you give them and when. Within a second of the behavior you want to reward him. That usually means having a treat pouch on you so you can grab it pretty quickly. In my house, I have a puppy right now who's 14 weeks, and I have a dish with a cover on it that's easily accessible. And he hasn't seemed to notice it yet on his own, so it's on my coffee table. Soon it will have to go to the fireplace mantle. But in case he does something really great or successfully I get him to stop doing something, I can reward him quickly. I'm using kibble for that right now because he's a puppy and he's just extremely motivated. If your dog is not motivated by food, you're probably not using the right food. Some dogs are never motivated by food, but 90% of them are probably motivated by something really tasty. You can use some of their regular food mixed in with hot dogs or cheddar, or many trainers use something called Happy Howie's, which is a giant, looks like a sausage roll, but it's dog food that you can cut into tiny pieces and use as rewards. And you can mix that in with their regular food and put it in your treat pouch. So they might get Happy Howie's, cheddar, kibble. Happy Howie's, kibble, cheddar, kibble, and it just keeps them awake. 3 or 4 different kinds of treats can really help keep them motivated. They don't know what's coming next. And you're rewarding them for the right behavior, but not forever. When they learn sit, we start to take away those rewards and they don't need them anymore. Unless it's a really difficult circumstance, right? If you want to get your dog to sit and there's a squirrel running by and he knows sit, he always does sit. Well, when the squirrel runs by and he sits, that I would jackpot even. I would go treat, treat, treat. You're awesome. Woohoo! If you pair your food or your toy, a really high value toy for your dog, with woohoo and getting excited, the dog is going to know A, that was the right choice, but B, you can then take away the food later and get him to just work for the woohoo, right? But I think it's fair to ask a dog to learn something new and reward him with a paycheck. You get a paycheck, they get a paycheck. And there's nothing wrong with it. You're not going to get a dog who's fat. especially if you use some of the kibble too. If you use small pieces, they just have to be big enough for the dog to realize that he got something and he's not looking all over the floor for what he thinks you gave him because he's already swallowed it. It's got to be big enough for that, but not large pieces. Large pieces are just not as rewarding as having 100 pieces, right? My niece, who's 8, has verified for me recently that she agrees that 25 pennies are better than a quarter. So think of that for your dog, 25 little treats, pea size, just big enough, especially a small dog, to know that they got something will get them to understand what you want pretty quickly. You start to wean off the treats when they're in an easy circumstance, and you use real life rewards also to get them to do what you want. So if you want your dog to learn to stay, you can have them sit and stay and open the front door. If they get up, the door closes. If you open the door and they get up again, the door closes. And they soon learn that positive reward of going through the door happens only when they stay, and their stay gets really good. If you mix a lot of their behaviors into the day to begin with, you end up with a dog who just listens really well. I see that my dogs are always looking to see what I'm going to do next because I'm always asking for something. I don't wear a treat pouch around the house all the time. With my puppy, I've been wearing it more and more just so that I can reward the good stuff when I see it. But generally speaking, they're just waiting to see what's going to happen next because I'm fascinating. If you use your girly voice, even a male trainer can get better success. They really like the fun voice. It's really good. Instead of sit. My late husband used to say, sit. And the dog would go, okay, but what's wrong? Or he would say, good dog. Good dog? It doesn't sound like a good dog. So be happy and upbeat, and you might get a dog who's happy and upbeat. Yeah? The rewards can be high value or low value depending what you're asking for. High value for something brand new. High value means hot dogs, cheddar, turkey breast, boiled chicken. The only problem with boiled chicken is sometimes it makes crumbs, so then they're vacuuming instead of paying attention to what you want them to be paying attention to. Whatever is high value for your dog. For some dogs, that's a tennis ball. They would love to have the tennis ball in their mouth right after they do the sit, and that's great too. Whatever works for your dog. By and large, the general training principles remain the same. There are different levels of training, so start teaching something brand new in a quiet environment in your house, whether that's the living room or the kitchen. In my dog's worlds, I can put the dogs outside my office and have just the puppy come into the office so he can focus. If there are too many distractions, they can't focus, right? So if you're a kindergartner and you go to school and you can't focus really well, you'll find that a one-on-one tutor gets you farther, right? So quiet environment, as few distractions as possible for a new behavior. Then I raise the stakes and I go into the yard or I go into the driveway, depending on your living situation. And there are now some distractions, but it's not the same as the real world. Then you can try it on the road, which is on the sidewalk, walking down the street. Can you get a sit once in a while? Can you go to a park or the parking lot near a store and get the same behavior? So that's the highest level of training. Maybe with other dogs around is a really big distraction for your dogs. But don't try to ask them to do something before they're ready. Everybody learns at a different rate. So if they can sit pretty reliably inside the house, then I'll take it outside. But if they're still not listening and coming when you call them inside, don't take it outside. Or sometimes go back to that and just remind them that we used to come when you were called in the kitchen. So why can't we do that outside? So go back to the kitchen and try it again. Good. When should you train? You should probably train whenever is convenient for your life. Some people will say their dog is napping now. Well, that's okay. Wake them up. They can handle that. But in your life, it's more important to train when it's convenient for you. I don't want a morning dog. I go back to bed with coffee and the puppy and just chill and watch the news in the morning because I'm creating a dog that I want. I want to create a dog who doesn't have really perky mornings because that's not going to happen for me. We do our training after I'm ready to do training, and then we do some work. But we mostly just mix it in the day. We'll do 3 or 4 minutes here and there of something new that he hasn't learned yet, and then we take a break. We used to say, dog trainers, that you should train in commercial lengths. Right? So you would watch TV and there would be a block of commercials, and that's the perfect amount of time to train your dog. It gets you off the couch, you train your dog, and the dog can focus for that short period of time. They have a little ADD sometimes. But nowadays, nobody's watching commercials. So figure 3 minutes is pretty good for something. You know, maybe you can do 20 minutes with your dog. It depends on your dog. Try to focus on a few behaviors, not do too many things at once, and then they can actually get them down pretty quickly. You can try, 6 repetitions of a down. And if they do 6 downs, quit while you're ahead. It's really tough to do, but instead of pushing one more and it comes out messy, try to stick with one behavior and nice and clean, a nice result. You succeeded, and then stop. Try to set them up to succeed. Don't try to get something from them. Don't try to teach them come when the squirrel is out in the yard. They're not going to pay attention. Teach them come really solid in your kitchen, and then see what happens with the squirrel later on. Try to set them up. If you think they're not going to come, don't ask them to come, right? They can learn 150 to 200 words, we've learned. There was a border collie named Chaser who recently just passed away, and he learned 1,022 words. Pretty awesome. Your dog could learn 1,000 words maybe, but you have to have a lot of time to do that. So put names on things. By osmosis, they can learn a lot of things, right? So they can learn upstairs, downstairs, because they're doing it anyway. They can learn inside, outside, left, right, the names of all their toys. They are a little sponge that you can fill, and often we don't fill them up with enough stuff. Make sure they're happy about what you're doing. If they're not loving going through agility tunnels, maybe agility is not their thing, or maybe you have to approach it in a different way. If they really love doing tricks, then work on tricks. If they really love being around other dogs, a group dog class is really great for them. If they're tentative about it, a group dog class could be really great for them. There are all sorts of ways to train your dog these days. You can go online. There are lots of resources, but there are also just videos to watch, online groups. We have workouts that we do online with a maximum of 6 dogs, and we all work together remotely. Works perfectly well. Sometimes working online with a private trainer can be helpful because the dog can focus on you only in the house. There's not that stranger in the room, right? So sometimes just working remotely can really fix some issues, aggression issues, for instance, because there's no stranger in the house and the dog can focus. As long as we can focus. It's hard sometimes for the humans to be able to focus well when they're home, I find. So this is just to get you started. We're going to talk more of specifics about learning sit and down and come. Most people want the 5 basics to start, right? Sit, down, come, stay, walk nicely on a leash. And then we can add in many other things, but at least get those down. Those will be in other videos. So the first thing you probably should try working on is marking the behavior when your dog does something that you want. So that means they go lie in their bed, which is just what you were hoping they do, on their own even, without you telling them. And you go, yes, good boy. Nice and gentle and easy, because you get what you give. If you give a really nutty energy and you get so excited because he's lying in his bed, he's going to get out of the bed, right? So I'm just going to mark that behavior. He went and lay in his bed. I go, oh, good boy, nice boy. And I mark it. I might even treat it, depending on how much you want him to stay in that bed. He might get out of it. If he goes into a sit and you're trying to teach that, you mark that behavior. The butt goes on the ground and you go, yes. And then within a second, you treat it. You're marking the good stuff that he's giving you. The word sit doesn't mean anything. You don't say sit until he's actually in the sit, because it's a waste of your breath. I'm trying to help you save some energy. So wait for the sit, mark it, treat it, and move on with a little praise. Yay, good boy. So try marking the good stuff that you happen to see at first, and then look at their name. Their name is usually overused. We all kind of say Snoopy, 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 Snoopy until Snoopy doesn't hear it anymore. You want to use their name because it's really valuable, but use it sparingly. If you use it too much, they start to not hear it. So I'm going to, a couple times here and there in the morning, I'm going to say Snoopy. And when Snoopy looks at me, I'm going to give him a treat. I'm not going to say his name unless I've got a treat in my hand, because I want his head to pivot and go, who, me? Snoopy? Am I Snoopy? And he knows because he just got a piece of turkey breast. A dozen times a day total. Just say their name and treat them for looking at you. It's giving them focus. They don't have to stare at you for long. They just have to turn their head and get a treat, and that's it. If they stare at you, even better. That's fantastic focus. But just so that they really, really do know their name. Everybody says, oh, my dog knows their name, but sometimes they're kind of vague, especially if you have multiple animals in the house or you have a 3-year-old child running around. They think their name is Hannah, but that's the child's name. But just be careful to not overuse it. When you're talking about the dog in your house, you don't have to use their name. Snoopy did this and Snoopy did that. Well, you could, your husband, you're probably not using his name very often at home. You could just say the dog. Your husband knows who you're talking to. The dog knows who you're talking to. As long as he's paying attention, you don't need to use his name. I would save it for when you want to get his attention, right? So if you start to use it too much, he's not going to hear you. And you can, I have several dogs. I have 4 dogs and 3 cats right now. And where I live, that's cool. That's the right number. But if I say the dog's name too much, to try to differentiate from the other dogs, he's not going to be hearing me anymore. So we're trying to minimize that. So just try that for start. Mark the good behavior, say his name, treat him for looking at you, and try to give the dog some nice breaks. Too much at once will tire him out and certainly tire you out. Thanks again. Keep watching the next video to get more specifics.